Ah, murderers. There's just something so interesting about the worst people in history. We're obsessed with what motivates them and how they work, especially with the weird little quirks that all the major ones seem to have. There are calling cards left on the scene, cryptic notes to authorities and others. But the best serial killer quirk is the trophies, and we're talking about killers here, so best actually means worst. Whether to relive their crimes, prove them, or just to build a human skin suit, killers sometimes take from those they've killed, and some of what they take is insane. More insane than usual, even. This list ranks 10 of the weirdest, wildest, or most gruesome trophies killers have ever harvested from their victims. Number 10. The Eyes. Charles Albright. The media has always had a habit of nicknaming every killer they possibly could, and if the killer has ever taken trophies, then there's your name. That's certainly true of our first entry, Charles Albright, known as the Eyeball Killer. Albright spent most of his adult life hopping from one crime to another. Theft, illegal weapons, assault, fraud, and his transgressions only escalated. By the time he sexually molested a minor, it was clear that his mental state was degrading. He then moved on to murder, even mutilating the victims' bodies. His trophies were their eyeballs, which authorities never found despite his arrest and conviction. Number 9. Camping Gear. Ivan Milat. You may know Ivan Milat as the backpacker murderer, or as Australia's worst serial killer, but what you might not know is the unusual trophy collection he amassed from his 7 victims. Milat targeted backpackers, offered them rides and then driving them into the forest, where he shot and or stabbed them. His victims were apparently on their way to or coming from a camping trip, as he chose to take their camping supplies as trophies. When police searched Milat's home, they found, in their own words, an Aladdin's cave of camping gear. Sleeping bags, a portable stove, canteens, you name it, and for some insane reason, Ivan Milat killed for it. Number 8. Their Baby. John Edward Robinson. Over his lifetime, John Edward Robinson earned no shortage of cruel accolades. He was a scam artist, embezzler, and forger, and his most famous title was the internet's first serial killer, due to his habit of luring victims via chat rooms. Yet another dark deed of Robinson's came in the form of one possession he stole from one of his victims, their 4-month-old daughter. Robinson met Lisa Stassi in 1985 while she was down on her luck and staying at a women's shelter in Kansas City under a fake name and posing as someone more successful and less murder-prone. Robinson offered Stassi a job, a home, and a better life. Instead, Robinson killed Stacy and stole her daughter. Stassi's body was never found, but the child fared better, thankfully. Robinson only kept her for a short while before giving her to his brother and sister-in-law. Evidently, they were unaware of her kidnapping. They raised her like they would have raised their own daughter in the end. The Screaming Boy, Chris Bush. This entry is a weird one, because the trophy in question came only from a serial killer suspect, and therefore could not be a trophy at all. The identity of the Oakland County child killer, who killed at least 4 children in the 1970s Michigan, was never conclusively determined. However, one of the suspects, Chris Bush, stood out, if only for the possible trophy. Bush allegedly committed suicide, which is debatable and worth looking into further, and at the scene, taped to the wall above his dead body, was a hand-drawn picture. It showed a young boy seemingly screaming in pain, who bore a striking resemblance to one of the confirmed victims, a young boy named Mark Stebbins. Number 6. Bathtubs of Blood. Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman whose misdeeds have become legends. Over the years, the stories of her cruel and cannibalistic acts have grown to the point where she has been hypothesized to be a possible inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. But there is very likely a true core to her legend. Elizabeth Bathory tortured and killed hundreds of young women. The real question is whether or not she kept the containers of their blood for drinking and bathing. Historians disagree on the legitimacy of those claims, citing them as either propaganda, fear-mongering, or just idle gossip. It is true that, as a child, Bathory's doctors prescribed rubbing on and drinking healthy young blood to treat her seizures. Combined with her targeting of healthy young virgin women and her extreme sadism, it seems possible that the blood remained a part of Bathory's life throughout adulthood as well. Number 5. 37 X's marked the spot. Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen murdered a possible 37 women sounds like it could only happen in a movie. After kidnapping and torturing his victims, Hansen would fly them out onto the remote Alaska wilderness, release them into the frigid winds, and hunt them for sport. The trophy he kept? A map behind his headboard, with little X's on it everywhere he dumped one of their bodies. The most chilling feature of the map is that Hansen had written 37 X's on it, while only 17 of his victims have been confirmed. Some of the 17 were found at locations the X's denoted, including bodies that were previously unknown as Hansen's victims. This strongly points to the legitimacy of the map, then further suggesting that potentially 20 or more of his victims await discovery to this day. Number 4. Their voice. Eddie Leonsky. At first mention, it may seem like killer Eddie Leonsky shouldn't make this list. After all, after 3 murders, he never once left the scene with a trophy. Instead, Leonsky earned his spot because he carried out every murder for the sole purpose of obtaining trophies. He simply failed every time. He failed because it was impossible to harvest desperately desired trophies, namely women's voices. In 1942, while Leonsky was an active service member in the U.S. Army during World War II, he strangled 3 different women. From witness reports, it was clear that he had attempted to murder several others similarly. When picked out of a lineup by multiple women, Leonsky confessed to his crimes. His reason? Like Ursula the Sea Witch, he was desperately jealous of women's singing voices, and only killed to get at their voices himself. Number 3. Feet, socks, shoes. Jerry Brudos. If Jerry Brudos were just into feet, he would be off the list, and instead featured on a top 10 kinks that you should stop shaming. Who cares anyway? I mean, come on. But Boudreaux loved feet too much, far too much. Brudos loved feet so much that he would murder women, cut off their feet and keep the rooting appendages as models for his shoe collection, also partially taken from his victims. Though feet were by far Brudos' biggest fetish, it's worth noting that he also kept victims' breasts to make plastic molds of them for use as paperweights. Number 2. Just Everything. David Parker Ray. Suspected of more than 60 murders, David Parker Ray, also known as the Toy Box Killer, is one of history's most prolific serial killers. If even half the allegations against him, many by his closest friends and accomplices, are true, then Ray was as abnormally twisted and wicked an individual. As befitting such a rare beast, the trophies he took from his victims are horrifying, both in content and in quantity. The FBI maintains a website that lists with pictures every trophy of Ray's thought to have come from a murder victim. The many trophy pictures are heartbreaking, especially knowing the inhumane amount of torture he subjected his victims to. Many are jewelry, but some are personal and intimate. Worst of all, some of them clearly came from young children. Number 1. The Dog, John George Hay. You don't get the nickname the Acid Bath Murderer because you're a great guy, but there are even worse things in killing and dissolving people. Specifically, there's stealing someone's dog, which is as bad as it gets. That's why John George Hay, the Acid Bath Murderer, makes it to the top of this list. In a nutshell, Hay's original story revolves around him going to prison for fraud and realizing that the best crimes leave no witness or evidence. Hence, when he was released and returned to his life of crime, he started tying up loose ends and throwing them in vats of acid. However, his worst crime came after he murdered Archibald and Rose Henderson to steal their possessions and sell them off. Though he sold most of their estate, he decided to keep and raise their dog for some reason. That's a tremendous insult to add to an already immense injury. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to subscribe now if you're not already subscribed to the channel. And if you are, please be sure to share this video and comment as much as possible. The more comments each video receives, the better chance of it reaching more viewers. If you'd like your story featured on an upcoming video, email thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I'll have my email in the description box below as well. Until we meet again, stay sinful.